Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Campers of Reddit, what was your most bone-chilling experience while out in the woods? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My dad and uncle went four-wheel driving up in the Cape in northern Queensland, Australia. They were driving all day, and when it got too dark, they settled on setting up a camp in a dry riverbed. They slept in swags, basically a canvas sleeping bag, so we're out in the open. At some point during the middle of the night, Dad woke up to a loud huffing noise and the sound of dirt scraping very close to him. At the same time, Dad also heard my uncle sit up and ask what that noise was. Dad got his flashlight and shone it on a massive bull, only 3 meters away, who subsequently turned to face the light and started stomping the ground. My uncle yelled at Dad to turn the light off before the bull charged, and then they ran behind the car to hide. The bull left, and my dad and uncle eventually went back to bed. I'm not sure if they slept. In the morning, they found out that they camped right on top of a game trail that the bull must use all the time. When the bull came across the camp, it knew there was something in the way, but because it was so dark, it didn't know what, so it just stood there, getting all pissed off. We were not in a campsite area, but hiked up to a remote little lake on Mount Hood. It started to rain late in the afternoon. By nighttime, it was a full-on windy, rainy time. We were under some large trees that helped with the rain a little, but the wind in the branches above was dramatic and creepy and loud. Slept like shit that night, kept waking up every 20 to 30 minutes to fix the tent or some loud noise. I don't know how long this went on, but it had to be 2 a.m.-ish when I woke up again, but this time there was something rooting around outside the tent. The fire was still going a bit, giving off a little light. Just exactly when he let out of the deep bass, guttural sigh that could only be a bear. He steps between the fire and the tent, projecting his silhouette against the side of the tent. His shadow was monstrous. Not sure how big he actually was, I never saw him. I reached down and grabbed my flip-flops and smacked the soles together as loud as I could. Crack! It must have scared the shit out of that bear, because he tore ass out of the camp and thumped out into the night at a gallop. It also woke up the rest of the camp, scared them half to death. They thought it was a gun and a horse. We had a good nervous laugh, made sure we were all alive and well, and had the shittiest scared night of sleep ever. Woke up cold, tired, and wet. Camping. Went camping with my family in northern Michigan around 1999. Huge property owned by my aunt. 4 sets of 3 cousins all went this particular weekend. We were doing our normal thing and playing hide and seek in a giant field on the property. My cousin Brent and I went way out near the woodline. Due to the hiding anxiety, I had to pee really bad, so I walked right up to the wood's edge and did my business. Keep in mind it's roughly 9 to 10 p.m. in the middle of nowhere, and while peeing in the woods, I hear a grown man cough clear as day. I say, hello, then I just hear someone walking away from me rather briskly. The whole thing freaked me out, so I told my cousin and we started walking back to camp. As we arrive, 3 of the parents are rushing out to get us with flashlights, and 1 with a gun. They had been listening to the radio and heard that on the stretch of road our camp was on, someone was pulled over, shot at police, and fled into the woods. They were still searching for him. No idea, obviously, if that was the guy, but it freaked everyone out after I told them what I heard, and we all stayed in the cabin the rest of the night. Okay, the next story has a depiction of finding a rock where some farm animals were slaughtered. It doesn't really go into detail, but if that's not your thing, give it about 35 seconds ahead. See you soon. I'm from Ohio. We weren't camping, but we always rode our horses in the woods behind our property, which was about a half a mile away from any house or road. One time, when I was probably 11 or 12, our horses became terrified and tried to run back to the barn. We got off a ways away and had one person stay with the horses because even leading them, they refused to go to this one area, and the others walked over. What we found was a makeshift execution stone, covered in blood and flies, with dead parts of sheep around it. A neighbor down the road had sheep, so we figured that they came from his place. These poor sheep were sliced or axed apart across a wide, flat, large boulder. If that wasn't strange enough, we don't have boulders like that around us. We were terrified, so we rushed home to tell our mom. Being the incredibly apathetic person she was, she told us to stay out of the woods for a while. We went back there a few years later, and there were skeletons all around the stone, but nothing new. In the Catskills last June off trail camping, we have a spot that over the years has been turned into a pretty great large campsite. The big boulder had rolled down off the side of the mountain, split in half. It's essentially created an enormous bonfire pit. We've laid out stones for a smaller cook fire, benches, etc. So we're up there. It's a quiet night, really nice. There were 4 of us. We have a fire going that's pretty significant, but it's getting late. I call it a night and get into my tent. Another friend does the same. To paint the picture, we have 3 tents in sort of a semicircle. The outfield is the home plate. This is a flat spot on the hill, which then drops off against about 10 feet behind where the tents are. The fire is about 10 feet from the hill heading back up. So I'm in my sleeping bag, half asleep. Another friend is in his, and the other 2 are awake chilling by the fire. And then we hear a clearly female human scream, as clear as it could be. Then male voices, chattering. Then I hear one of the friends outside the tent yelling something like, "Hey, who's there? Don't come closer." And I hear rustling and more voices, which seems to be coming from just behind the tents. Can't be more than 20 feet down the hill. Terrifying, hair standing up vibe. Before I can make it out of the tent to see what's happening, we start hearing yipping. Effing coyotes had decided to be extra curious, had surrounded the campsite, and were flashing up and down the hill, staying just at the edge of the light from the fire. Never heard a coyote sound quite like that before. Gives me the nails on a chalkboard feeling thinking about it now. Not so much creepy, but bone-chilling in hindsight. I volunteered a youth group, and every summer we go out camping with the kids. Often there will also be spooky, scary night where we set up something of a haunted house, but along a dark forest path. 2 years ago, we found an abandoned military compound, storage and ammunition with a few garages. Now this area was completely overgrown by trees and high grass, with the compound rusted and old. Effing jackpot. This is going to be so creepy. That was when we found a small structure with a metal sliding door, which opened with a long, terribly eerie screeching. We decided to make that a feature in the trial and continue setting up. This was around late afternoon. We return, get a campfire going, and hype up the kids with scary stories. Awesome. We take them back to the compound in the middle of the night, and it is effing terrifying. Several kids outright refused, but the few wanted to prove their bravado. So we take them along the trail, where several others are positioned at key spots. There was someone in the dark clothing, just standing in the woods, just concealed by the darkness, who ran away when we got near our oil lantern. Eventually, we hear the metal door screech open and shut again. The kids are shivering in their shoes, and I and my buddy as well. It was the height of the evening. We returned to the fire, and the kids were all claiming they weren't even scared. We ask, who did the sliding door thing? And everybody just looks around. Similarly, nobody had run from us when we approached. So we did some asking around, and apparently it's a place where people come to shoot up. And we took a group of kids to it. Yeah. Sitting around a campfire are my 2 young kids, 5 and 4, my wife, my brother and sister-in-law with their 3-year-old, and another brother-in-law of mine. Brother-in-law is standing telling a story, and out of nowhere, an adolescent moose pops up behind me, maybe 15 to 20 feet. To which my brother-in-law, drunk, simply just says, "Moose." No one moved an inch because my wife's nickname is Moose. So there was this moment of confusion as the words "moose" didn't fit into his story at all. Then we all heard more rustling headed our direction, and out pops a gigantic moose. We all grabbed the kids and headed for the trucks. Luckily the moose ran off because I'm positive if that moose wanted to, he could have flipped that truck over as many times as he wanted. Wasn't an easy tent camping night. Well, this isn't in the woods, but it certainly sent a ripple down my spine. When I was in junior high, I was out late at night riding my bike, probably around 1 in the morning. I had just gotten into the neighborhood heading home. I came around a corner, and about 300 feet in front of me, I saw a very tall orange figure. It was cylindrical in shape, with no real extremities to it. Just a very tall, honestly around 11 to 12 feet tall, orange figure that moved about as fast as a car on the highway around another corner. Now I was patching myself up because where it rounded the corner is where I had to go to get home. I came up to the corner slowly to kind of look around it. All I saw was a construction vehicle parked in the middle of the road. After I started pedaling normally, the vehicle turned on and put their lights on. They then followed me through half of the neighborhood. I never had a care in the world to see if I could find the big orange thing again. We weren't camping, but my buddy and I went into the forest in the dead of night and had the worst scare of our lives. I knew about this little hidden area in the forest that was a cool place to chill. You had to go down a hill, but you would end up by a river with a bit of a scenic view. I decided it would be a great place for us to smoke a joint, relax, and take in Mother Nature. Well, we got down there, smoked a joint, and started hearing these weird noises coming from on the hill behind us. It almost sounded like a baby crying. My friend and I just looked at each other with the same freaked out expression on our faces. Mind you, we were now pretty stoned too. All of a sudden, the cries stop, and we hear these loud demonic sounding noises, roars, roaming from the same spot on the hill. It continued for about 30 seconds and then stopped. We stood there frozen without hearing anything with our hearts in our throats. We finally built up the courage to book it out of there after a few minutes of us just standing there, sitting on our pants. I'm not much of a believer in the supernatural, but I still have no idea what that could have been that made that noise. People are quick to suggest that it was an animal, and the fact that we were high makes it sound less credible. But that noise we heard was something out of a nightmare. No animal could make that noise. In the woods, I don't know to be honest, but my dad saw a huge boar a few weeks ago. At first he mistook it for a bear, but it turned out to be a boar of around 200 kilos, he estimated, well enough to kill a man. It still roams free. It has kind of become a bit of a legend around here. As for me, it was not in the woods really, but we were out kayaking and decided to go explore some islands a bit further away. So, we went there without trouble. We were on one of the islands and saw a rainstorm at the horizon. We thought that we should hurry back to our base camp island before the rain caught up with us. We didn't get to the island before the rain caught up with us, and it was a thunderstorm. A thunderstorm with winds and hail so heavy, rain it was hard to even look. The rain filled the boat, making them unstable. The waves were a meter high. We blew, really, of course, and we ended up facing the wrong way because we were too stressed to steer. Everyone just focused on paddling. Thus, the boat started to wave from side to side when the waves crashed into the side. The rain created a thick fog, so we couldn't even see the island we were trying to get to. Everyone thought we were going to die. Now and then, you could hear the lightning striking the water. Then suddenly, the storm just disappeared, just like that. We were so relieved, we just sat in the boat screaming, "Yes!" Cumulonimbus clouds, lightning clouds, are really small in diameter, but are instead really tall, so thunderstorms don't last very long. We knew this then and there as well, but we were way too stressed out to think about it. I'm really glad it happened though. I learned a lot from it. If you see a storm coming your way, wait until it passes. Well, I was in Scouts for 13 years and we did summer camps every year. There were shifts of night watches to just make sure that no stray animals, weird-ass dudes, came into the campsite and endangered the others that were sleeping. At the age of 15, you would start participating in those shifts. We usually walked around with our flashlight off and kept the campfires fairly low to reduce light sources, because if there was someone watching, they would know our exact locations and could easily go around us. So, one time, on a routine checkup of the perimeter, I heard some rustling nearby, so I went and checked it out. Stick in one hand, turned off the flashlight in the other, and a knife on my belt. I thought nothing of it at first because sometimes the older scouts did raids where they stole stuff from the site, and if they weren't caught by night watch, we would get some sort of punishment in the morning, like get tied to a tree for a couple of hours or take on all the chores for the day. Anyway, as I got closer, I started to hear some growling. At that moment, I started to get spooked and thought a wild dog was there. Usually wild dogs get scared of you when you approach them with a light directly in their eyes and a stick. So I proceeded to turn on my light, and to my surprise, it was a fucking wolf. Like, I've seen some wild dogs before, and I'm sure wasn't just imagining it being bigger than usual. It just stood there, growling and showing its big-ass teeth, slowly approaching me. At that point, fight or flight kicked in, and I slowly started backing away with my flashlight at it, and then trying to get my knife out of the stick hand. I swear, taking it out felt like cracking open a safe. After a few steps back, it started running at me. I just said to myself, screw it, dropped the flashlight, took out the knife, and got ready for that shit. The wolf pounced on me and scratched my arm real bad while I was trying to hit it with the stick or the knife. Fortunately, I got the stick stuck in its mouth, so the absolute unit of a wolf couldn't fire down on me. I finally got a good hit on it with the knife, and it backed off on me. I started shouting at it and waving my stick and knife in the air at it to try and scare it away. And it worked. The beast was afraid. It just started running away. After about 30 seconds, another scout same age as me came running. Let's call him Mike, because he heard shouting and saw me covered from head to toe in blood. The wolf's blood. Scratches here and there, and a big-ass wound on my arm. Mike freaked the f*** out, and I was still pumped up on adrenaline, shrugging it off like, yeah, just got attacked by a wolf. Mike proceeded to blow the danger whistle that I should have used in the first place, but, I don't have time to blow a whistle when a wolf is about to eat you. After all that, the adults came, and they had them freaked out too. Took me to the principal in the hospital, and got all kinds of shots and bandages for my wounds. From then on, every scout on night shifts had to be on patrol with at least one other scout. I still got a scar on my hand and a hell of a story after that. I'm just glad it didn't get worse than that, and I lived to tell the tale. Was hiking for an early morning deer hunt, armed in hunter orange and heavy clothes because it's freaking cold enough using a bandana to breathe. Found my spot on the hillside, started to snuggle in while keeping eyes wide in the little pre-dawn light, just looking for movement, being quiet, breathing slow and even, and listening. Head on a slow pivot, which is the only reason I discovered a mountain lion. Me. I caught a glimpse of the hot breathing plume. Just a glimpse. But it was evaporating, so it caught my eye. looked again, then stayed there letting details come out, still not yet sunrise. Finally, realized a big old mountain lion was focused on me, breathing, just standing there, tall, bare tail, barely moving. I can't say I know enough about big cats to know whether he was just watching me or actively hunting me, but it freaked me out. Yes, I had a good rifle. Yes, I'm a good shot with it, but it's still a single shot, 30-06, and it's freaking cold. My hands are still in thick gloves. Didn't really think, just stood up tall and started waving my arms and screaming. He looked for a minute, then turned and disappeared. I was too freaked to continue by myself. Didn't want to hunt while letting it sneak up on me, so called it in the morning. I was solo camping in the wilderness when I heard a most gut-wrenching scream I've ever heard from an animal. Mind you, I'm 13 miles into the wilderness area at a very remote lake with no one around for miles. It sounds close, but I am in a bowl that makes the sound echo and is hard to determine the location. As I am going through a list of animals in my head to try and figure out what could be making the noise, I realize that it is a mountain lion cub crying for its mother. I freak out, knowing that means she is out hunting. Out of the predators in the woods, mountain lions scare me the most. Something about being stalked and knowing they could be up in a tree or a rock, really to pounce down, scares the shit out of me. I quickly exit my tent as I was just getting ready for bed and let out a battle cry and positioned myself with my back to the lake. After the initial scare, I built up a huge fire in front of me, and I spent a good 4 hours on high alert, just waiting for Mom to pounce on me at any moment. Not my experience, but my hubby's. Years ago, he and a bunch of friends went camping up near the Washington state-Canadian border to hang out and drink for a few days. They were out in the middle of nowhere, having fun, partying, eating canned beans, etc. for a couple of days with everything going well. One morning they woke up hungover to hear something moving around in their camp. My hubby unzips the tent to look out and sees a teenager bear, his phrase, trying to break into his buddy's car, where they had stashed the food. It scares him so much that he began to have seizures, dang epilepsy. His buddy in the tent with him began to yell, and so did the other friends in the other two tents. It scared the bear away, and they were able to all pile into one of the cars, which was a tiny thing, like a gremlin. Hubby was unable to tell them that he had the car keys to the larger vehicle in his pocket. 6 large men crammed into a tiny car, with one of them seizing, tearing down the mountain to the nearest rinky-dink town for medical assistance. Hubby was fine, and they all had a laugh about it after, but at the time, they all thought they were going to die. My brother and I were fishing one time off of a remote northern island on Lake Winnipeg, sort of in a gulf. When we started to hear the bells on the rods we set start to ring, we often leave our rods out on sticks and watch them until there's a bite or two. Watching a second, both of us look up to see this rod absolutely take off 15 feet into the air because slamming down into the water and getting taken out at 300 yards. It took about 2 minutes of confusion and wondering what the hell was happened to see our rod pop back up in out of the water only about 50 yards away, almost like a baiting scene from a horror movie. What does my brother do? This diehard fisherman takes off his shirt and dives into the rock-bedded waters full of zebra mussels. After this rod that's slowly being pulled back out again, we spend good money on this rod. Sincerely, or apparently, he gets to the rod, finally about a football field length into the water, and pulls on the rod to find there's nothing on the other end. He swims to shore cautiously, and we further investigate, but still can't figure out what the hell it could have been. We have Lake Sturgeon, but would they have done that? Ogopogo? Some very good family friends own about 200 acres of land in the Midwest United States. This land is about 50-50 grassland and forest with a decent-sized pond. Around the pond, we've cut down a small section of the grass where we have our own campground, with a fire pit, tables, and where we keep our campers year-round. For years, we have been going out to the farm and camping, hanging out, hunting, and just spending our weekends out there. The weekend after my high school graduation, we went out to the farm to hang out with about 7 other close families and a couple of my close friends from high school. Normally, we'd set up a tent or stay in one of the campers, but not this time. Being very familiar with this property, I had a few spots I'd always wanted to set up a tent to sleep. My friends and I went back into the corner of the property, which was all forest, and decided to set up camp on a flat spot in a little clearing, probably about a 10 by 10 clearing, next to a dried up creek bed. We hung out there that evening just chatting, talking about video games or whatever, until dark, then went into the tent to lie down. We kept the conversation going while lying down until we heard some leaves rustling outside the tent. We dropped our conversation to a whisper and were freaking out, but quietly. As the footsteps and leaves got closer, I started to hear some familiar snickers and whispers from my dad and his friends attempting to scare us as they got decently close to the tent. I said very loudly, "We know it's you guys." We all laughed and went back to bed to our conversations, and they went back to the camp. Well, about 15 minutes later, we were all trying to sleep when we heard the leaves rustling again. But there was something different about the way these leaves were rustling. This is when we all started to become very paranoid. We stepped out of the tent, and the 4 of us looked around frantically with our flashlights and saw nothing, but still heard the leaves. We all unanimously decided to scratch the whole camping in a tent in the middle of the forest idea and ran back to the main campsite as quickly as we could while leaving the tent still set up. When we got back to the campground area, all the adults were around the campfire enjoying drinks. No one was missing. So we started freaking out and telling the adults, about what happened. Being drunk, they didn't think anything of it. We set up another tent near the campers and slept there. We tore down the other tent in the forest the next morning when it wasn't pitch black with scary noises. Looking back, it was most likely a squirrel or raccoon just going about their lives, but to us, we thought we were about to get mauled by a mountain lion or something. One time in elementary school, there was a lot of woods behind our school, and coincidentally enough, it was Halloween and it getting dark about 8 p.m., and there was a fence around the school, but every day my friend and I would dig under it so one day we could escape. So this day on Halloween, we had snuck into school dance and a little haunted house, and we snuck out, all 4 of us, and got under the fence and started walking around in the woods, and we found an old algae-infested pond and sat there and threw stuff into it for a while, then got bored and saw this old house, decrepit and abandoned, no windows, doors of any sort, and nothing wood, all falling apart. So we started walking back because it was getting too dark, and we got to the hole in the fence. 2 of my friends already made it through, and my other 2 friends and I had our backs turned from where we just came from. And then I saw their faces turn white and eyes blank, and I got chills and stood there. And I turned around, and there was just an older man staring at me. But I felt his eyes staring deep into my soul. There was something off, and I felt it burn a hole in me. My friend, who also wasn't through the fence yet, didn't have the same reaction. He ran and grabbed me, and we got out of there. But so many years later, I can remember everything about that moment.